Of all the support roles in Genshin Impact, shield characters have probably become the most useless ones. Ever since Zhongli came out, shield characters have become very few and far between. The only shield characters that have come out since Zhongli's release, not including characters that get shields from constellations, are Thoma, Layla, Baizhu, and Kirara. Thoma, Baizhu, and Kirara's shields are not all that good, but they make up for it by having other parts of their kits that make them better. But what about Layla? Well, Layla is the only character with a shield that can hold her own against Zhongli's. Her shield isn't as good, but it's still one of the best shields in the game. I've already done Zhongli only in the past, so I wonder if Layla can also beat Genshin Impact on her own. Here are the rules. I can only use Layla in battle. Any puzzles that require another element can be completed with another character. No healing items in battle, no co-op, and all swords are allowed. Now let's see if you can beat Genshin Impact using only Layla. The first thing we do is Amber's domain. Since we couldn't trigger the pyro monuments, I tried doing the skip in this domain. It took a few tries, but I got it. Next is Kaya's domain, which we played normally outside of jumping over the spikes. Lastly is Lisa's domain, which we also perform a skip in to complete it fast. That's the end of Act 1. Now we need to get to AR10 to start Mondstadt Act 2. This seems like a good time to talk about Layla's strengths and weaknesses. We'll start with her pros. Her shield is amazing. It's probably the second best shield in the game behind only Zhongli's. Not only does it protect really well, but it can also deal damage, but we'll get into that damage in a bit. She also has great cryo application with both her elemental skill and burst. Even without any elements to stack onto it, it's useful because it'll slow down the enemy. Her normal attacks also are not too bad as well. Also, when our burst hits, it can give us a Night Star when we have our shield up. Now for the cons. Her elemental skill's damage is pitiful. You basically need her second passive talent to deal any passable damage with the Night Stars. Her particle generation is also pretty bad. The only way you'll get pretty much any particles with her elemental skill is through the Night Stars, and even then it's not that great. It seems like this will be a challenge where I mostly use physical damage. For this AR grind I did the usual Mondstadt exploration. I collected animalculi, did adventure handbook missions, opened teleport waypoints, and opened plenty of chests. After a bit we're at AR10, but I didn't stop there. I continued doing more random exploration, which mostly involved opening a lot of chests. And once I reached AR12, I unlocked commissions, which is a great source of adventure rank experience. I then did Kaya's story quest, and after that I finally used the 20 wishes I had accumulated.
One Harbinger of Dawn is all I...
This is your team? Cool.
You are not a Harbinger of Dawn, Bennett. You're not even gonna give me a Harbinger. Oh my god. But this one. One Harbinger of Dawn is all I need. Oh, thank God. And a Kujo Sarda, of course. Cool.
We pretty much got nothing outside of the Harbinger of Dawn, which is now R5. Harbinger of Dawn is genuinely a great weapon. Its substat is crit damage, and its passive can raise your crit rate when your HP is above 90%. With Layla's amazing shield, that'll basically always be the case. We then completed Amber's and Zhengling's story quests, and after that I went to Sumeru to get some Nilot Pala Lotuses so we can ascend Layla. All our first passive talent does is make our shield stronger when we get a Night Star, which is definitely something. I get a wish from ascending Layla, so let's see what we get.
Why? What the hell? What the fuck?
Sometimes I wish I just couldn't get a 5-star, and this is one of those moments. Next I did Lisa's story quest, which is where I stopped grinding. I had a few pulls from ascending my other characters, so let's do those.
A 4-star sword. Hey, a sword actually. I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna use it, but sword. Another 4-star. Sakuro's. I thought you were dead.
I decided against using Sacrificial Sword because Harbinger of Dawn is already doing its job really well. Now I can finally start Mondstadt Act 2. We meet Clover Cookie and then go to Windrise to fight an Eye of the Storm. Because we had our burst, it was really easy. We steal the Holy Lyre from the Cathedral and meet the Pyro Archon of Prettiness, and then go to the Fatui hideout. We beat the agent at the end so fast that he was only able to be invisible for like 2 seconds. Next we need to get 3 teardrop crystals scattered across Mondstadt. First was the Ruin Guard, which wasn't too bad because of our constant cryo damage. We opened a chest for the next one, and lastly was the domain. A lot of the enemies in this domain were simply taken out. The Pyro Abyss Mage's shield at the end was drained away using the water, which made that fight a lot easier than it could have been. Now that we have all the teardrop crystals, we can summon Dvalin.
This is really awkward.
Dvalin.
That's the end of Act 2. We reach AR 18 at the end, so we don't even have to AR grind. Act 3 starts with us fighting a Hydro Abyss Mage, which you can probably assume was pretty easy. Since we're cryo, we can permanently freeze it with our burst. Once we make our way into Stormterror's lair, we need to activate 3 light actuators. The only one with combat was pretty easy, so now we can fight Dvalin. Sadly, I wasn't able to keep up my streak of challenge accounts 1-phasing Dvalin. Layla was able to take him down the second time though, so we're fine. Besides, how could I ever be mad at someone as great as Layla? Clover Cookie got his soul stones taken away, and that's the end of Mondstadt Act 3. Now we need to get to AR 23 to start Layla. For this AR grind, we get Diluc's and Razor's story quest. First was Diluc's story quest, and the only interesting part was that we ran into our first Cryo Abyss Mage. Thankfully this game sucks, so he didn't attack me once. After completing Diluc's story quest, I finally decided to bite the bullet and fight the Eon Blight Drake. I think that the biggest problem about this fight is the elemental resistance that it gets. Sometimes when it flies up or lands, it'll gain a resistance to the element that you last attacked it with. And since the only element I can attack with is Cryo, it'll always gain a Cryo resistance. That's our only real way of dealing damage because it has 70% physical resistance. This kind of reminded me of the days of physical damage only, but it's worse here because I can't knock it down when it flies. This battle in its entirety took 11 minutes, and I know it's only going to get worse as we ascend our world level. Still, I'll take this over Xingqiu vs. Oceanid any day.
Give me 2, that's all I ask for. That's all I ask for. Oh my god, why? Just give me the fucking drop. I don't even care what you want at this point. Oh, thanks. Now you give me one, too.
I opened some luxurious chests in Sumeru City and then do Razor story quest. Afterwards, I did some Cecilia Garden to get the drops for Harbinger of Dawn, and then finally started some Liyue exploration. From the Virgin Jade Chamber, I got a 4-star physical damage bonus goblet, which was very useful. It also had crit damage and energy recharge that were both raised, which is great for a 4-star artifact. Doing a bit more Cecilia Garden gets us to AR 23, so now we can start Liyue. The alter ego of the other character that has a good shield dies, and now we have to tell the Adepti about his death. First is Mooncarver, and because of his buff, we always had our Celestial Dream Sphere, I looked up the name, up. Next is Mountain Shaper. I don't know if they changed something about this quest, but I always find this guy's brother in one of the last pieces of amber. Next is Cloud Retainer, who we made some food for and then skipped her domain by jumping off a tree. Lastly is Zhao. All we really have to do at this part is fight a Ruin Hunter, who wasn't that hard, and that's the end of Act 1. Now we need to get to AR 25 to start Act 2. After doing some commissions, I fought the Wolf of the North, which you can probably assume was pretty slow. The Wolf is immune to cryo, so we can only hit it with our physical attacks. It wasn't terribly long, but it was a little annoying. I did a lot of Trial Grounds of Thunder for this AR grind, which easily got us to AR 25. Now we can start Act 2.
4-star.
Forza
Horizons!
We meet the other good shield character and then go to Mondstadt to boil some rocks. The hilly trails were easy, but we had to use Benoy to heat the pot because Layla is not pyro. Next was Granny's teapot, which was entirely filled with slimes. I made sure for the big cryo slimes to use the pyro flowers to get rid of their shields fast so I can deal with them much easier. At the Guizhong Ballista, we have to fight a bunch of treasure hoarders. If you've watched both physical damage only and a character dies after every Archon quest, you know that Layla does not have a good relationship with the Guizhong Ballista. So the question is, did she get knocked off this time? No, she didn't. She just beat up everybody. Next we have dinner with Zhongli, and they end up talking about how much better their shields are than everybody else's shield, and that's where Act 2 ends. Now I need to get to Era 28 to start Act 3. There's still a lot of Layla to explore for this era grind, so I'm gonna do that. The world quests that I did were the Chi of Yore, Treasure Lost, Treasure Found, and Luhua Landscapes.
Pain Slasher. Ugh!
I also fight the Eon Blight Drake some more for when we reach Era 30. It's still very slow, but it's not really that hard. After completing Treasure Lost, Treasure Found, I did some polls.
What the? Why? I don't know.
Why is this account so unluckily lucky? I did Xingqiu's story quest and then meet the real Zhongli in co-op. I opened a random chest and we're at AR-28 now, so we can start Act 3. We trigger the animal mechanism in the mountains with Sucrose and then fight the Millith at Guizhong Ballista. I think Layla finally broke the Guizhong Ballista's curse, because she once again wasn't launched off. Next we need to sing to some flowers for Zhongli, and after doing so, 3 Cryo Whopper flowers appear. They were pretty easy and weren't able to freeze me once. Next is Child. We bullied him in Phase 1 and 2, and in Phase 3 he wasn't able to break down our shield once. Lastly is Osile. Despite the fact that
Cryo is always far more effective in the rain.
we almost died before getting our buffs because of Osile and the Electro Hammer guy. But once we got our buffs, it was fine. That's the end of Act 3.
Now we need to get to Era 30 to start Inazuma as well as complete the 2 Dainsleif quests we get. The only Cryo Abyss Mage in the Dainsleif World quest isn't even mandatory, so that was really easy. That's not the same for We Will Be Reunited though, as you have to fight 3 of them back to back to back. For the first time in a while during one of these solo challenges, the final fight of We Will Be Reunited was a cakewalk. You only have to take down the Abyss Herald, so we can pretty much ignore the Abyss Mages because they can't take down Layla's shield. To get the rest of the experience I needed, I farmed the Trial Grounds of Thunder with the Condensed Resonine Lock to speed up the process. Now we're AR30 and we can ascend ourselves once more. I decided at this point that now is a good time to start leveling up Layla's talents. I noticed that Layla's damage was starting to fall behind, so I think it would be a good time to level Layla's talents. I get them all to 3, which should do for now. The Inazuma Prologue quest was easy. The only enemies are treasure hoarders and slimes, which are almost never hard. Now I can go to Inazuma. I lost a lot of my Act 1 footage, so I'm just going to recreate it in Photoshop. Act 1 starts with a lot of running around Narito, but after we do that, we can do the transport mission. It was just some treasure hoarders in Ronin, which were pretty easy. Next we need to break somebody out of jail while fighting the Tenryou Commission soldiers. The military force of Inazuma can't stop an overworked, tired college student from Sumeru. Layla, maybe you're going for the wrong profession. That's the end of Act 1. Now we have to do Ayaka's and Yoimiya's story quests, which aren't worth covering, so let's skip to Act 2. First we have to fight the Raiden Shogun, who barely even hurts us. Even when we can't use our shield, she couldn't get a good hit on us. Next we save the Virgin from 2 Tenryou Commission soldiers, and at the Resistance camp we have to do the archery demonstration. If you think Layla might be able to do this because of her shooting stars, she can't. They don't track the dummies, so we'll just have to hand this over to the Teach. At the front lines we once again proved that Layla chose the wrong profession, and that's the end of Act 2. Act 3 starts with us clearing the run-in around Watatsumi Island. Aside from the Pyro run-in making me go absolutely flying, nothing was interesting. For the 3 Electro Monuments, we used Kujo-Sara to trigger them, and then the Electro Lotro that appears was demolished. I haven't mentioned it yet, but when you trigger Superconduct, everything that gets hit by it gets their physical resistance dropped by 40%, which is quite useful for our physical Layla. Next was the Delusion Factory. Of course Layla destroyed most of this domain, but I expected that. This is mostly because, for the first time in any of our solo challenges, we can stun the Electro Hammer guy. This guy has always been the bane of my existence, and probably my least favorite enemy besides the Geobishop. I cannot tell you how genuinely happy I was to be able to knock them down for the first time. I think I might have found the one. Scaramouche makes us pass out from sleep deprivation, and then we meet the person who was being very sus during the fungi event. Later on we meet
That toy Tanuki just turned into a human!
Sayu and Layla can form a sleeping club.
At the Tenryou Commission building, we once again prove Layla chose the wrong profession, and next is Signora. You might think that the cryo phase is a little bit harder, but remember we're physical, so the cryo resistance doesn't really matter. In the Pyro phase, she wasn't even able to do the tornado move before dying. Lastly is the Raiden Shogun. It's cool to see our burst dealing 2k per tick, which is all I can really say about this fight. That's the end of Inazuma Act 3.
Now we need to get to Air 35 to start Sumeru. We also need to complete Requiem of Echoing Depths, which is the next Dainslift quest. Before I can do that, I have to fight the Aeon Blight Drake. This fight only gets longer and longer as we ascend our world level, which is annoying because we have to get 8 drops from the sky for AR 35. After a long time of fighting them, now I can do Requiem of Echoing Depths. The Black Serpent Knights were easy, the Abyss Lector was easy, the Abyss Heralds was easy, and almost all the Abyss Mages were easy. The only Abyss Mage that gave me some trouble was this Cryo Abyss Mage. The other one in this quest had a Pyro Abyss Mage pair with it, so we could easily melt its shield. The most we could do for this Cryo Abyss Mage was superconduct the Electro Abyss Mage when they were nearby, which didn't do much. After we completed that quest, I decided to grind for Pale Flame and Tenacity of the Millith. Which one I went for really just depended on which one I got good artifacts for, which ended up being Tenacity of the Millith. Once we reach Air 35, we can do the Ascension Domain. I actually ended up losing on the last floor on my first attempt, and we took that personally. So for the next hour, I grinded for various things. I changed my artifacts to 2-piece Tenacity, 2-piece Martial Artist, got Harbinger of Dawn to level 70, and got all my talents to level 5.
4-star Layla. Wrong L character!
When we returned to the Ascension Domain, I crushed it. Now it's time for Sumeru, and all I can say before getting in here is
home field advantage!
I also lost the first half of Sumeru Act 1's footage, so I'll recreate that too. First we have to clear a Withering Zone, and all that was there were some Hydrofungi. Next is the Tree Domain, where we only had to fight some pretty easy Hilichurls. At Port Ormos, we meet the Dendro Archon of Prettiness, and later buy some knowledge capsules from Dory. We test out one of them that we bought against some fungi, who were really easily taken down. At the end, we have to fight some Eremites at the dock. It surprised me how effective physical Layla is. Next is Act 2, and all I really have to say is the Eremites were easy, and now Act 3. We meet
the Doctor,
and then fight with some Eremites in the forest, which were a bit more difficult than the other two groups, but only because there were more of them. In the desert, we fight some Rift Hounds, and even despite corrosion being able to hit past shields, they barely dealt any damage. Next is Act 4. This act starts with another group of Eremites, who are the easiest so far. At the Elazar Hospital, there were a bunch of Hilichurls, and the only remotely difficult one was the Geolauchurl. Our physical attacks never really did much to him, so he was able to get his shield twice before Layla took him down. For the 3 Dendro Pillars, I wanted to see if Layla could trigger all 3 of them with a Dendrogranum method, and while she can trigger 2 of them, she isn't fast enough to make it to the last one. I even put 2 Animo characters on the team to get the Animo Resonance buff, but even then that didn't work. So then I put Kai on the team because his passive makes it so I consume less sprinting stamina, and that did the trick. Next is the King Deshret domain. I beat all the enemies pretty fast, even the room with 2 Dendro Flying Fungi and 2 big Hydrofungi, and clear the puzzles fast, and that's where Act 4 ends. Act 5 starts with Sumeru's favorite enemy, Eremites. We have helpers for this, but I don't think they got a single kill. At Party's DI, we have to fight some Fatui soldiers, and in the past I've struggled with this fight because of the Electro Hammer guy, but because Layla is cryo, we can stun him. And that goes doubly true for the Deus Foundry. She had no problems with any enemy in this domain, and the only enemy she could have had problems with, we could skip by doing some
parkour!
Like I said before, I think I found the one.
Now it's time to fight a
Bonafide god.
Phase 1 is obviously easy, and in Phase 2, she's one of the few non-bow characters that can take down the Nirvana engines, and she was even almost able to take down Scaramouche when he was stunned. This is a certified Slayla moment. Lastly is the polluted part of Irminsul. I discovered that you can knock down some of the Rift Hounds, which makes the fight even easier. And on the boat were a bunch of Hilichurls and Electro Lauchurl. We quickly take them down, and that's the end of Sumeru. Now we need to get to Air 40 to start Fontaine, as well as do Caribert. The only part worth mentioning in Caribert is the Cryo Abyss Herald. Once it got its Cryo Shield, we could only hit it with our physical attacks, which barely did anything. This fight almost took 10 minutes, which is the longest non-Aeon Blight Drake fight. Speaking of Aeon Blight Drake, after completing Klee's and Venti's story quest, we have to fight it some more. We need 12 of this guy's boss drops to ascend ourselves to level 80, which means we need to fight him 6 times. Interestingly though, during one of the attempts I was actually able to knock him down.
How after all these attempts, how is this the first time I've stunned it? How did that work?
I still don't know how that happened only once throughout the entire playthrough. I got this great picture of Layla, and then we went to the Trial Grounds of Thunder to get to AR-40. Once we reach AR-40, we ascend both Layla and Ola Reliable. Now we can start Fontaine. At the start of Act 1, you have to collect Romaritine flowers at Romaritine Harbor for Linny and Lynette. You need Hydro to be able to collect them, and for challenges where I couldn't do this, I just swapped over to a Hydro character. I learned that you can grab 3 Hydro Grana and then quickly run over to the flowers to apply Hydro to them to be able to collect them. Aside from that, there's not much to talk about in Act 1 besides Child beating up some random people and meeting both the Geo and Hydro Archons of Prettiness. Act 2 thankfully gives us more to do. We investigate with Navia for a while before entering this underwater domain. It was filled with Gardemex, which resisted my physical attacks pretty well. Nowhere that hard, quite the opposite in fact, they never really put me in any danger of dying, but it was still annoying. Act 3 and 4 are all dialogue and cutscenes, which doesn't make for interesting challenge content. But here's a question. How did Layla get in jail? Maybe it's because she didn't pay her student debt. First in Act 5 is the Tower Domain. Commonly in this domain, the last floor of the tower with 2 Hilichurl rogues and a Ruin Guard is by far the hardest fight in this domain, and it often leads to somebody dying. But this time it was the floor with the 3 Mitochurls. They were breaking through my shield quite a bit and dealing a lot of damage. We didn't die, but we got knocked below half HP. Before long, we're out of there. Later on, we convict Farina of not being the Archon, and it turns out she's guilty. This leads to Farina and Focalor plot, but before then we have to fight these 2 Gardemex. Imagine being made to be strong and take down enemies and criminals, only to be taken down by a tired, overworked college girl from Sumeru. One of the best cutscenes in Genshin Impact happens, and now it's time for the all-devouring Narwhal. This fight was very one-sided, we didn't even lose any HP. We just need to wait for him to eat us and then take down the Shadow's shield to end the fight. With that, Act 5 is over, and we beat Genshin Impact using only Layla. Oh yeah, we also ended with 4 million Mora, so that's one less thing for Layla to worry about. Yeah, this challenge was about as easy as I expected. I take back what I said about Layla having underwhelming damage output, because she very clearly held her own in this challenge. She didn't deal the most damage of all my solo characters or anything, but she did really well. On the tier list of difficulty, this goes between 1-star weapons and Diluc only, and on the solo tier list, this goes at the bottom of amazing. It's crazy how much a good shield can help you out, as well as being able to take down the Electro Hammer guys. My next challenge will be Geo only, one of the most limited elements in the game. But until then, I'll leave you with that.